Priya Kapoor's dream wedding in London turned into a nightmare when Raj Malhotra, driven by pride and family honor, uncovered her secret forged virginity test, while Dr. Emily Carter's hidden involvement, Maya Sharma's heartbreaking testimony, and Inspector James Harris's relentless investigation exposed a chilling story of love, lies, and a wedding day murder that shocked the world. Priya Kapoor grew up in a traditional Indian household in London, where expectations of family honor were tied to every step of her life. From a young age, she was reminded of her duty to preserve not only her own reputation, but also that of her parents, Anil and Meera Kapoor. They had worked hard to build a respectable life in a city far from their homeland, yet they clung to traditions that often weighed heavily on their daughter. By the time Priya entered her mid-20s, the pressure for her to marry was overwhelming. Proposals from suitable families came one after another, and her parents eventually arranged a match with Raj Malhotra, the son of a wealthy businessman. Raj was well-educated, charming in public, and carried the pride of belonging to a family known for both wealth and influence. For Anil and Meera, it seemed like the perfect match that would elevate their status within the community. But beneath Priya, as quiet smiles and graceful demeanor, was a secret that she carried with mounting fear. Years earlier, while studying business management at university, Priya had fallen in love with Daniel Wright, a fellow student from a completely different background. Their relationship had been passionate and deeply personal, but Priya knew it could never survive the expectations placed upon her. When her parents pushed her toward Raj, she ended her relationship with Daniel, convincing herself that her past could remain buried. Yet what lingered from those years was not just memory, but something that could shatter her future. The Malhotra family, deeply rooted in tradition, demanded proof of purity before marriage. They insisted that Priya undergo a virginity test, a practice archaic in the eyes of many, but for them, it was a non-negotiable requirement. The mere thought left Priya paralyzed with dread. She knew she would fail, and with failure would come humiliation, rejection, and possibly the destruction of her family's name in the community. Terrified, she sought help from her closest friend, Maya Sharma, who stood by her through sleepless nights of worry. Maya introduced her to Dr. Emily Carter, a sympathetic clinic worker who had encountered other young women trapped in similar situations. Through discreet connections, Emily managed to forge results that declared Priya pure. With those papers, Priya was able to silence the suspicions of Raj's family, at least temporarily. As the wedding day approached, Priya appeared radiant on the outside, yet she was haunted by an invisible weight. The grandeur of the preparations only intensified her fear. Raj's family flaunted their wealth, booking one of London's most luxurious venues and inviting hundreds of guests. For the Malhotras, the marriage was not just a union of two individuals, but a display of their family's dominance and pride. Priya, dressed in ornate gold and red attire, looked every bit the beautiful bride everyone expected her to be. Still, in her heart, she trembled at the possibility that her secret might surface. On the morning of the wedding, Raj seemed calm, collected, and eager to claim his bride. Priya smiled for photographs, exchanged pleasantries, and tried to suppress her growing anxiety. But as she walked down the aisle, the whispers of her past lingered like shadows in the room. Unbeknownst to her, Raj had begun to hear rumors, quiet murmurs of her relationship with Daniel that threatened the very foundation of the union. While Priya clutched onto the hope that the falsified report would protect her, another storm was already gathering, one that would turn her wedding day into a nightmare beyond imagination. The weeks leading up to the wedding had filled Raj Malhotra with a sense of triumph. To him, marrying Priya Kapoor was more than just a union. It was an affirmation of his status as the heir to his father's empire. On the surface, Raj carried himself as the confident groom-to-be, charming guests and organizing grand displays of wealth. Yet beneath the polished exterior, small cracks of insecurity had begun to form. At first, they were no more than whispered conversations overheard between acquaintances at community gatherings. Someone mentioned Priya's time at university, hinting at a relationship with a man outside her culture. Raj dismissed it initially, choosing to believe the test results his family had demanded. The medical papers stating her purity became his shield against doubt. But the seed of suspicion had been planted, and with each passing day, it grew. Raj's pride was anchored in the traditions his father Arjun Malhotra had instilled in him. In their world, family honor was paramount, and any stain on that honor was unforgivable. For Raj, the idea that his bride might have belonged to another man was intolerable. The whispers began to gnaw at him. He found himself replaying moments of Priya's behavior in his mind, the way she sometimes avoided his gaze. The nervous energy that flickered beneath her poised exterior. To an outsider, she appeared like any bride, overwhelmed by the stress of an elaborate wedding. But to Raj, her unease was confirmation of something darker. Late at night, Raj began to investigate quietly. He dug into her past, pressing mutual acquaintances for details, and his efforts soon led him to Daniel Wright's name. Daniel had been a known figure at Priya's university. Someone who didn't fit into the cultural mold that her family expected. When Raj learned that Priya and Daniel had not only been close, but had shared an intimate relationship, his rage deepened. The virginity test results that had once calmed him now seemed like a sham. A carefully constructed lie to fool his family. His anger was not just at Priya, but at himself for being deceived. He imagined the laughter of others behind his back, mocking him for marrying a woman who was not untouched. Not what tradition demanded. Raj Malhotra, always watchful of appearances, noticed the change in his son's demeanor. Raj grew restless, irritable, and short-tempered. At family dinners, his silence was deafening, and his sudden outbursts unsettled even his mother. Raj did not reveal what he had discovered, but his father suspected something was amiss. Arjun reminded him of the weight of their family name, urging him to uphold their honor at any cost. Those words only fueled Raj's brewing obsession, twisting his doubts into a justification for what he was beginning to consider. Priya, meanwhile, remained unaware of how much Raj had uncovered. She continued her preparations, clinging to the belief that her secret was safe. She placed her trust in Dr. Emily Carter's forged report, believing that the document had erased her past. She busied herself with ceremonies, rehearsals, and countless traditions, her every action carefully observed by the Malhotra family. To her, Raj seemed slightly more distant, but she assumed it was the natural stress of the approaching wedding. She did not see the storm building in his eyes, the fury that grew with every passing glance. By the eve of the wedding, Raj's doubts had hardened into conviction. To him, Priya's deception was unforgivable. Her betrayal was not just personal. It was, in his mind, a humiliation inflicted upon his entire family. What had once been a celebration of love and tradition was transforming into a stage for vengeance. As Priya adorned herself with jewelry and henna, dreaming of stepping into a new chapter of her life, Raj was quietly plotting how to ensure that the Malhotra name would not be stained by her secret. The line between groom and executioner was already beginning to blur. The morning of the wedding dawned with grandeur. The Malhotra estate in London transformed into a palace of opulence. Golden drapes fluttered in the breeze, the scent of roses and marigolds filled the air, and guests dressed in shimmering silks and tailored suits streamed through the gates. To outsiders, it was the perfect display of wealth and culture, a union that symbolized not only love but power. Priya Kapoor, dressed in layers of crimson and gold, looked every bit the radiant bride. Her smile was polite, her movements graceful, yet behind her eyes flickered nerves that refused to settle. She told herself it was simply the weight of the day, but in truth her secret was like a shadow she could not shake. Raj Malhotra stood tall in his ivory shawani, the picture of a dutiful son carrying his family's honor forward. He greeted guests, posed for photographs, and played the part of the devoted groom flawlessly. Yet beneath the surface, his mind churned with thoughts of betrayal. The laughter and applause of the crowd mocked him. Every cheer for the couple sounded to his ears like a cruel reminder that he was marrying a woman he believed had already given her love to another. His jaw tightened with every blessing offered. His hands clenched behind his back, and his gaze lingered on Priya with a mixture of admiration and contempt. As the rituals began, Priya's parents, Anil and Meera Kapoor, watched proudly, believing their daughter's marriage was securing her future. Anil, ever conscious of cultural expectations, beamed with satisfaction that his family had been accepted into the Malhotra circle. Meera, though joyous, felt a faint unease at Priya's forced composure, but she brushed it aside as the natural overwhelm of a bride. Raj's parents, Arjun and Sunita, sat as pillars of authority, their approval painted across their stoic faces. To them! This wedding was not just about uniting two families, it was about preserving the image of tradition and control in a foreign land. The ceremony proceeded with chanting priests, the flicker of sacred fire, and the ritual circling of the flame. Guests admired the couple, whispering about their beauty and the grandeur of the event, while no one noticed the storm raging silently within Raj. Each step he took with Priya around the sacred fire was heavier than the last. Each vow he repeated in front of hundreds of witnesses felt more like a curse binding him to humiliation. He looked at Priya's lowered eyes, her soft smile, and in that moment, all he could see was betrayal hidden beneath jewelry and silk. As the rituals reached their peak, whispers began to ripple through the crowd. A distant guest, unaware of the tension, mentioned Priya's university days and her closeness with a man named Daniel Wright. The name reached Raj's ears like a dagger. His suspicions had already taken root, but hearing Daniel's name spoken aloud among his guests was unbearable. It was no longer a private shame. In his mind, it had become a public humiliation. Rage, long restrained, began to consume him, hardening his thoughts into a singular focus. The wedding stage, adorned with flowers and golden thrones, became the site of mounting tension. Priya sat beside Raj, oblivious to the darkness in his gaze. She believed the rituals had secured her new beginning, that her forged past was behind her. Raj, however, saw the day not as a union but as a reckoning. To him, every cheer was an insult, every blessing a mockery of his family's honor. By the time the final vows were spoken, Raj's decision was clear in his mind. He would not let Priya's secret survive the day. The wedding that dazzled with lights and laughter was destined to become a scene of horror, and none of the smiling guests could have predicted the blood that would soon stain the celebration. The reception glittered with music, dancing, and the endless clinking of glasses. Guests filled the grand ballroom of the Malhotra estate, marveling at crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and a feast that seemed to never end. The bride and groom sat side by side on a raised stage, smiling for photographs, accepting gifts, and appearing as the perfect couple to all who watched. Laughter rang out as friends and family toasted the union, praising the young couple for their beauty and good fortune. Beneath the polished exterior, however, a storm brewed, invisible to most, but impossible for Raj to ignore. Raj's expression, though controlled, betrayed a certain stiffness. He nodded at speeches and smiled for the cameras, but inside, his heart pounded with anger. The whispers he had overheard earlier in the day about Priya's past returned again and again in his mind, each repetition growing louder, more unbearable. Every time Priya leaned forward to greet a guest, every time someone praised her beauty or grace, it felt like salt pressed into an open wound. His pride, the legacy of the Malhotra name, felt tainted, and the very thought of the deception she had carried out gnawed at him with merciless persistence. Priya, meanwhile, tried to carry herself with grace, hiding her nerves behind polite smiles. She felt the weight of Raj's stares, cold and unrelenting, though she dared not confront him in such a public setting. She told herself he was simply tired from the long rituals and the endless string of celebrations, but deep inside, she knew something had shifted. She tried to focus on her friends, Amaya's whispered jokes and her mother's gentle smiles. Yet she could not shake the unease that crept into her chest. The moment of rupture came quietly, almost invisibly. Raj excused himself from the stage, moving into the shadows of the hall. His mind had settled on a decision, one that seemed as natural to him in that moment as breathing. He would not let Priya's deception stand in front of his family, his friends, or society. The anger that had simmered all day finally ignited into something darker, colder, unstoppable. As Priya stepped down from the stage to greet a group of relatives, Raj returned. His hand gripped the handle of a ceremonial dagger, part of the traditional display, unnoticed among the ornate decorations. In the middle of the music and laughter, he moved toward her with frightening calm. No one suspected, no one paused their chatter or their dance. The act itself was sudden, shocking in its brutality. Before Priya could even react, Raj struck, plunging the blade into her chest in front of hundreds of horrified witnesses. The music stopped instantly. gasps and screams erupting through the hall as Priya collapsed onto the polished floor, her crimson wedding dress soaking with a darker red. Guests froze in disbelief, unable to comprehend that a celebration of love had transformed into a scene of unimaginable horror in a single instant. Chaos followed. Women screamed, children cried, and men rushed forward, some trying to restrain Raj while others attempted desperately to help Priya. The golden ballroom, once filled with joy, descended into pandemonium. Plates shattered as people stumbled, the scent of rich food mixing with the metallic temps of blood. Raj did not fight when he was seized. His face was blank, devoid of panic or regret. In his mind, he had defended his honor, restored his family's pride. Priya's parents collapsed beside her, begging her to hold on as her life ebbed away before their eyes. Mira's cries echoed through the hall, while Anil stood frozen, his entire body trembling, unable to reconcile the tragedy that had struck so suddenly. Raj's parents watched in shock, their proud faces transformed into masks of disbelief, their empire of honor reduced to ruins in a single stroke. The wedding that was meant to unite two families had ended in unspeakable tragedy, and the once bright future of Priya Kapoor was extinguished in front of everyone who had gathered to celebrate her. What remained was chaos, grief, and the shadow of a crime that would haunt both families forever. The aftermath of the wedding day, murder spread across London like wildfire. Newspapers splashed the headlines with images of Priya in her bridal dress, frozen forever in the moment before tragedy struck. Reporters described it as one of the most shocking wedding crimes the city had ever seen. And within hours, the Malhotra and Kapoor families were thrust into a storm of questions, accusations, and grief. The police investigation began almost immediately, with Inspector James Harris taking the lead. He was determined to understand what could drive a groom to kill his bride in front of hundreds of witnesses. Raj was arrested at the scene without resistance, his hands still stained with blood. When asked why he had done it, he offered no explanation, only repeating words about honor, betrayal, and truth. To the police, his cryptic responses hinted at a motive deeper than simple rage. Inspector Harris and his team began piecing together the days leading up to the murder, and it was not long before the secret Priya had tried so desperately to bury began to surface. Investigators discovered that Priya had visited a discreet clinic weeks before the wedding. Records showed that she had obtained falsified virginity test results, arranged quietly through Dr. Emily Carter. When questioned, Dr. Carter admitted that Priya had been desperate to protect her reputation and ensure the marriage went forward. She confessed that Priya had spoken of her fear of Raj's reaction and the immense pressure from both families to appear pure before the ceremony. This revelation gave investigators the missing piece of the puzzle. Raj had likely learned about the falsification and reacted with violent fury on their wedding day. The trial that followed was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed with journalists, activists, and members of both families, each side trying to preserve what little dignity remained. Prosecutors painted Raj as a man consumed by toxic pride, unwilling to accept imperfection, and driven by a warped sense of honor. They detailed the brutality of his crime, the public nature of it, and the coldness with which he carried it out. The defense, however, argued that Raj had been provoked, that cultural expectations and family pressure had warped his state of mind, pushing him into a fit of uncontrollable rage. Witnesses were called to the stand. Maya, Priya's best friend, broke down in tears as she recounted Priya's fears in the weeks before the wedding, revealing how Priya had confided in her about the forged test and her dread of Raj's reaction if he ever found out. Dr. Carter testified reluctantly, admitting her role in helping Priya conceal the truth. The testimonies painted a picture of a young woman trapped by cultural expectations, and a man who believed his pride mattered more than her life. After weeks of hearings, the jury found Raj guilty of murder. The judge delivered a life sentence, describing his act as a senseless killing born of arrogance and cruelty. Outside the courthouse, Priya's parents wept as they spoke of their daughter's bright future cut short, while Raj's parents retreated into silence, ashamed of what their son had done. The story did not end with a verdict. In the months that followed, debates erupted across communities about the pressures placed on women, the outdated obsession with purity, and the destructive consequences of honor culture. Priya's name became a symbol of both tragedy and the urgent need for change. Campaigners used her story to raise awareness, demanding that no woman should ever feel forced to falsify her worth to meet society's expectations. Raj sat in his prison cell, stripped of his freedom and his family's pride, while Priya's memory lived on in the voices of those who sought justice beyond the courtroom. The wedding that was supposed to mark the beginning of a life together had instead become a chilling reminder of how secrets, pride, and cultural pressures could collide with devastating consequences.